Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Earthworks. It's good to have you here. We are going to look at the art form of zendoodling today, which is really relaxing, and it allows us to kind of check in with our emotions and be thinking about how we're feeling in this time. And then we are also going to look at the life cycle of leaves and what we can learn from them in terms of our own emotions and checking in. So before we get started, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about zendoodling. So, zendoodling was begun by Rick and Maria Thomas. They are a match made in heaven, let me tell you, because Rick, a longtime practitioner of meditation, met the beautiful Maria, a botanical calligraphist, and they found that their primary topics of conversation were about geometric forms and sacred shapes. And from there, zendoodling and zentangling was born. So a zendoodle is a drawing created out of doodled patterns to create a recognizable object, or it can just be an interesting abstract picture. It's comprised of pattern, repetitive line, and it can be used as a calming and meditative practice for the artist. So now that we know a little bit more about zendoodling, we're going to talk about how we're feeling. Human beings are just a multitude of things. We feel all kinds of emotions, and sometimes more than one at once, sometimes more than one in an hour or a minute. I know I do, and especially lately with a lot going on in the world, it's easy to feel a mix of things all at one time. So I thought that it would be appropriate to look at leaves, because leaves also exhibit a multitude of things. When you think about a leaf and the sort of term of its life cycle, there are a lot of different stages that it goes through, and it's sort of known that leaves represent multiple different things in different seasons of life. So right now in spring, with the green and the chlorophyll and the growth, leaves represent life and new energy, and there might be days where you feel like that. You feel excited or invigorated or energized. And that sort of continues through the summer, and then they can represent death or somberness in the fall. Because as you know, as beautiful as they are when they're red and yellow, that's their chlorophyll, their life, their energy leaving them. And then they're a direct representation of death because they are dying and falling. And sometimes in our own lives, it can feel a lot like we are losing something or we are grieving something, and we have to let it pass. Maybe right now you're grieving graduation not happening, or you're grieving the fact that you can't see someone that you love. And those are very real feelings, and that is much like a leaf dying and falling away. But then it kind of goes through this journey. It can represent a journey of the soul, because leaves, when they fall to the ground, that death, that somberness is not in vain. It actually later serves as nutrients in the ground for new growth. So I'm not trying to make light of any difficult thing that we might go through, but it is never in vain. There's always something that we can learn from it or grow from in it. Even though the world can feel senselessly painful very, very often. So in winter, a leaf makes that journey and helps create a nutrient-rich ground for new growth and rebirth. And that is such a symbol of hope. So when leaves begin to bud on the trees, like we've seen them do the past couple of weeks, and flowers come up on the trees, it really is a sign of hope, and it completes that whole life cycle. And those are emotions and feelings that, again, you might feel at any given time. And they're all valid, and they're all invited in our own life cycle in the same way that they are with leaves. So today, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to create with leaves today and think about our own emotions and hearts. For this project, you're going to need a small piece of blank paper, a permanent marker, some fresh leaves, a few Q-tips, and one solid color of paint. So earlier I talked a little bit about zentangles and zendoodling, and to get started you're going to need that piece of paper and your permanent marker. The easiest way to get started is by beginning in a corner. So again, Zentangling and Zendoodling is a series of sort of repetitive and meditative patterns. So I might get started with a few shapes that are familiar to me. And then after I'm tired of that, I could try moving my paper and try some new shapes and forms. So what you're going to want to do is try a few different patterns, forms, lines, and continue moving that paper around. And really, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just a chance to really be present to the marks that you're making. It's a great way to check in creatively, emotionally, and to really just sort of play with pattern and form. You can see they're all kind of neighbors with one another. Now, for inspiration, I like to look at old textiles, papers. So here's some really beautiful pattern on this record cover, you can kind of see. And you can even derive pattern from things that you see in other items. So you can see I'm kind of playing here with some of the things that I'm seeing on this record cover. Here's some old sheet music too. And there's some unique patterns and ways of sort of repeating. And I might add, you know, a leaf that I see here. So you can draw inspiration from anywhere, from nature, from other highly textured or patterned items, and get practicing. So once you feel comfortable with your ability to zendoodle, you can get your paint and your Q-tips ready. And I would recommend practicing that art form of zendoodling with your paint on a piece of paper before we move on to zendoodling on leaves with paint. So you can see I practiced some of the same forms that I used in my example. Here I have some swirls. So I really derived pattern from what I'd already created and kind of gave it a try on a piece of paper. I'll do this. You'll want to have something underneath your leaves. And then what you're going to do is lay your leaves as flat as possible and dip your Q-tip very generously in your paint. And you're going to zendoodle on these leaves. And again, play with pattern, repetition, form. Turn your leaves around like you would your piece of paper. And really think about, again, what mood you're in. Remember the things that I talked about with the life cycle of leaves and the different things that they represent. And as you're kind of checking in with yourself, again, creatively and emotionally, and reflecting upon leaves, think about where you're at today. For instance, I'm this kind of tender mix of grieving and grateful in this pandemic. I'm grateful for all of the things that I have, for my health, for the ability to make art with all of you fine folks, even virtually. But I'm grieving the fact that we can't meet in person. I'm grieving the fact that I didn't get to spend Easter with my family. So, you know, in this time, you might be a real mix of moods, and you can think about that while you're spending time creating. And in the end, you'll end up with a variety of patterns on your leaves. Now, I do want to mention this. If you do not have paint at home, you can use the Sharpie that you used earlier, and you can create patterns on leaves using permanent marker as well. So just be aware of that. But the paint shows up really nicely because it's lighter than the green leaf. So either one works. Some food for thought this week. Be sure to check in with yourself. Is there a piece of the life cycle of leaves that you resonated with most? Or perhaps a few hit home for you, particularly in this time? You can take a moment each day to think about what exactly you're feeling, why you might be feeling that way, and how it feels when you create art. Hey, thanks for tuning in this week. And next week, we'll use natural elements to create collages like the contemporary artist Anastasia Kovaleva. See you then.